Hello, I am Mr. Hallahan, Music Director at Holy Ghost Preparatory School, and in this video I am going to talk about the bass clarinet solo repertoire for the 2021 All-Catholic Band Audition. For this audition, you're going to perform the Concerto No. 8 in B-flat by George Handel, and you're asked to prepare up to measure 46. So in the interest of time, this video is only going to cover that portion of the solo. Before we start playing, realize that this piece comes from the Baroque time period, written in about the middle 1700s, while our modern-day bass clarinet doesn't come around until about the middle of the 1830s. So that means that this piece has been transposed for us to play from another instrument, in this case the oboe. What that means for us is that the articulations would be a little bit lighter, a little bit crisper, and also there might be a little bit of vibrato in the performance practice, something to think about before we play. So let's get started by taking a look at the Adagio section. In the Adagio section, the two most important things you can do are have good breath support and also pay attention to your counting. The tempo indication in this section is Adagio at 8th note equals 88 beats per minute, and it even says underneath in 8. So while the time signature does specify common time, 4/4, we need to be counting the 8th notes and not the quarter notes. Take out our metronome. Eight beats to fill out one measure of time in this piece. So our first measure where we enter, measure 5, would be counted 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6, and 7, 8, and 1. Some things to look out for in the Adagio section. Number 1, a lot of the entrances are on the weak beats, the up beats in your counting. Remember that we're counting in 8th notes, so these 16th note entrances are for the most part on up beats as we're counting along. Second, in measure 10 and in measure 19, those whole notes equal 8 beats because again, we're counting 8 eighth notes and not 4 quarter notes. And lastly, just a little bit about the performance practice. This being a piece written in the Baroque time period, it would have been incumbent on the performer to add all of the emotional nuance to the piece as they played along. But we're going to rely on what the editor has provided to us, which is pretty good in this case. So please pay attention to all of the dynamics, the few places where there are some breath marks notated, and lastly, the trills. In the Baroque time period, for the most part, you can count on trills starting from their upper tone, and they will be diatonic to the key that you're playing in. So, for example, in measure 11, that first trill that happens on the B is going to start on the C, the note diatonically immediately above, and would sound like this. And now, let's listen to the whole movement. Next, a quick look at the Allegro section. Again, starting with the tempo. listed as Allegro, quarter note equals 104, and again underneath specified in 4. So although your time signature is listed as cut time, 2-2, we do need to be counting this in 4 at quarter note equals 104 beats a minute. Again with the metronome, for one complete unit of time. Some things to look out for in the Adagio section. Well, very much the same. Please pay attention to your dynamic contrast, what little of it exists, but more importantly as you're playing through, I want to hear the difference between your slurring and your tonguing in articulations, especially in each of these eighth note passages. Notice that for the most part you have 2 notes slurred and then 2 notes tongued. For example, in measure 36, please be specific on your articulations when you're playing this. Some of the things to look out for rhythmically are playing on upbeats. Are you playing an 8th note or are you playing a 16th note? For the most part it is 8th notes, but do make a difference when those 16th notes come out. For example, measure 30. The very last note after beat 4 is a pickup note of a 16th note into the next measure. By comparison into measure 31 where you have an 8th note. Another thing to look out for in your counting is when you should be playing on beat 2 from a note that's been tied over in the previous measure. An example of this happens after the end of measure 40 into measure 41. The note that you're playing on F starts on beat 2. Be careful not to start that too soon. Each of those entrances are really important to be keeping in time.
And now, let's listen to the whole movement.
Then last, just to give you a little tip, it's probably something most of your teachers would say, you have a lot of 8th notes here, and we may not be used to playing them if we play bass clarinet in our ensemble where we unfortunately play a lot of just low whole notes. In this case we have a lot of opportunities to show our ability to provide some articulation in what we're playing. Sit and go through each one individually and then add each. You're not going to be able to sit and play this whole thing from beginning to end. You've got to start somewhere. So for example, if I wanted to practice through, let's say just measure 30, I might take just the first beat and play it by itself. Then add each little bit. And you'll be able to finish out the whole thing.